Hey everybody, John with Vermont Homesteader, and my son got a deer yesterday during Vermont youth season, and I'm going to show you how to skin it today. I didn't get the shot on film because his older brother was with him. I do have a little film of me and him the first morning of youth weekend. It's a nice 4-pointer. It was 144 pounds field dressed, about 180 pounds live weight, and out of the 144 pounds field dress, we'll probably get about 85-90 pounds of meat out of this deer. And we're going to make bacon cheddar burger, we're going to make sausage, we're going to have some steaks, we're going to have stew meat, and we're also going to take a lot of the good roasts and we're going to be smoking them, some of them, and we're going to corn some of them. So instead of corned beef, it'll be corned venison. So we're going to do a lot of different things with this deer, and hopefully we'll have some more deer coming so we can do even more things with them. Get some more meat in the freezer and share it with our friends and people who may need some meat this winter. So, okay, I'm going to get to it and show you how to skin a white-tailed deer. So the first thing I need to do is take the lower legs and cut them off with a saw. There's no meat on the lower portion of the leg. Real butchers have really nice power tools for this, but I don't, so. Yeah, the coyotes will eat whatever I throw up there. And the birds, they also like the suet and the meat. Caleb wants to keep the head, so we can do a Euro mount. It's basically the skull and the antlers. And we'll bring it to a taxidermist. Now for the head, you want to get right down by the base. This is if you're not going to do a full mount. This rack is not big enough to do a full mount, especially since they're $900 to $1,000 a piece nowadays, because there's a lot of meat in the neck, so you want to not get too up on the neck. You want to stay pretty close to the actual head. Now we're down to the bone, so we're going to take the saw and cut through the bone. This is pretty much how it's done for anything: a cow, sheep, goats, pigs. There's different cuts of meat in each one, but basically the process is similar. If you're not keeping the head, I would actually leave it attached, and I would just start skinning from the top and pull the skin all the way down to this same point, and then cut it off like we do with does. But it doesn't matter. You can do it this way too with the doe. the heads off. And this is what we'll bring to the taxidermist, and they usually use beetles. Beetles will eat all the flesh and hair off the deer right down to the bone, just like they would if you put it out on the earth. Bugs come and they eat everything away, and you're left with just the bones. So we're going to set that aside. Okay. Now we're going to lower the deer, and I'm going to start up there. I'm going to start up on the hindquarters. Before I do start on the hindquarters though, there's white and brown parts of the deer, and you just want to slice right up where the white and the brown come together on the leg. Right up to the shoulder. And when I start from the bottom down, you'll see why I do that. Okay. And you're just slicing this connective tissue between the skin and the meat of the deer. And we use everything on the deer, all the meat. The stuff that's like this meat here, this is all grinding meat. I don't like any steaks from this area. Some people do. I think it's too stringy. I don't use it for stew meat either. This is just meat that we grind up for burger. But we use it all. We have grinders. We have dehydrators if we want to make jerky. We have the smoker, electric smoker. We have the actual smokehouse, which uses real wood to smoke. Well, I'll be using that for some of the bigger roasts in this deer. We're going to smoke them. Have almost like a ham. And I was going to just smoke them, but I think I might put them in a mixture of brown sugar and honey for a few days, just to brine a little bit. And then I'll smoke them. Okay, that's good enough for that leg. Now we'll do this leg. Same thing, right up the white and brown. Here, I'll bring the camera over so you can see. You can see there's white and there's brown, and you just want to slice up somewhere near the edge of that. I'm actually not right on the edge on that one. I was more on the edge on this one, but that's what you do just to get the skin off this lower leg. And because it goes around the whole leg, you got to get it off. You can't just slice down the deer and it all falls off. So the deer is lowered to where I can get to these back side of the deer, and we're just skinning. We're making a line right up the inside of the back leg. And we're gonna slowly take the skin off, or the hide off, a little at a time, so we don't waste any meat. Start on one side and then work on the other side. A lot of connective tissue in a deer that connects the hide to the meat. We're just basically slicing through those. Come all the way around the leg. Now when you're doing this, there's tendons in here. You want to be careful not to cut the tendons, because they're what this metal hook is through. And if you cut the tendon, then the deer won't stay up. It'll collapse down to the ground. So you want to cut around those tendons and not cut through them. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm getting around the back side of the tendon. Now so we got that whole leg skinned, and we're gonna do the other leg now. You want to get them both done, because then when we cut the tail, you can literally just pull on the hide and it'll come off. I mean, you'll still have to cut some, but by pulling you can get a lot of it off much quicker. But we got to get past the tail, and then you use the tail kind of like as a pull cord to pull it off. You always got to be careful with knives. These knives are pretty sharp. I've cut myself several times, but you'd rather not, because you are dealing with wild game, you're dealing with bacteria, which just naturally occurs. That's why we cook our meat, even when it comes from the store, because there are bacteria that can hurt you if the meat is not cooked. There's good bacteria, there's bad bacteria. We can't tell the difference between the two when we're eating our food, so that's why we cook it. We're not coyotes that eat raw meat and do well with that. Make these little cuts, pull the skin away a little more with each one. If I do cut myself, I go right inside and clean it out real good and get a band-aid on it, and then come back out and finish up, and hopefully don't do it again. Always good for a little slice once or twice a season. And I'm still here, so obviously not too much happens unless you don't take care of it. You don't have to touch the connective tissue very hard for it to pull away from the deer. You're not cutting into big chunks of meat, you're just cutting these little connective tissues. Now we're going to get down to the tail here. And like I said, this is how all big game is done. It's how cows are done. It's how pigs are done. The food you get from the store, somebody's doing this in a meat processing plant. Probably seen it in movies. There's be meat hanging all over the place on hooks, and that's what they do every day. They butcher cows or pigs or sheep, and then it gets packaged up and shipped to the store for us to buy. We're just doing it ourselves here. Probably costs 100 to 120 bucks now per deer to have somebody else do this for you. So it's good to learn how to do. Plus you get to choose your own cuts of meat. Like literally, like hands-on, get to choose your cuts of meat. And if in the middle of processing deer you're like, you know, I'd rather have more burger than sausage, or I'd rather have more steak than burger, you can just change course right in the middle of processing the deer. Just cut it a different way than you originally thought about doing. So it's good to learn how to do this. This deer has quite a bit of fat on his rump, and he was pretty heavy for his age. I bet he's 2.5. We sent a tooth in to Fish and Game, so we'll get his age back eventually. But I'm gonna bet he was 2.5, and you know, 180 pounds live weight. That's good for a 2.5-year-old deer. That's a real healthy deer. And he's got a pretty good amount of fat on his rump already, which means he's probably been eating lots of nuts, beech nuts, oak nuts, stuff with a lot of fat and protein in it, both. That's how he built the muscle and the fat stores. We're almost down to the tail. And then we'll need that saw again to cut through the tailbone. And there it is. And once we cut through the tailbone, then I can raise the deer back up and pull. There it is, through the tailbone. And just to give you a little demonstration, you just grab the hide on the inside, right where the tail is, and just start pulling. And you can see, look at that, it's coming off quick. There's some connective tissues you gotta cut every once in a while so you don't pull meat off it. But I'm gonna raise this up, and then I'll show you me pulling it, and we'll go pretty quick down the main body of the deer. So I raised the deer up some so that we have more downward force and can pull. Like I said, we got to keep skinning as well as we go. The real bloody spot, that's where the deer was shot. And what little meat is there on the rib cage will not be good because it's filled with blood that didn't get a chance to drain out because of the shot. It's basically the belly side that needs to keep being cut. The back side pretty much pulls right off. Now we're down to those legs, those lower legs. What you got to do is just cut the hair, the hide, away, because you're gonna get into the shoulder meat if you don't. There we go. We cut through that sleeve we made down here. There's the shoulder exposed now. We're going to do the same thing on this side. Just got to get a little lower here on the neck. You're basically just skinning down the deer until you've bullets right in here someplace. Looks like it entered right here. Maybe. Looks like he shot it right in the shoulder. They did put a second round in it as they walked up to it. You just keep skinning down the deer until you get it all the way off. It takes some time, but it's not really that hard, especially if you have some good knives. Little strength, not a ton. but enough just to, you can usually just use your body weight to lean on the deer, on the hide as you pull it down. There it is, there's a bullet. 1.308 round. I think that was the second shot. We're down into the neck now, and we're just going to keep cutting around. Usually the deer you can't pull at the neck. The connective tissue gets quite a bit tougher and it won't pull. You just keep cutting down. This neck meat, some people do a neck roast. I usually grind it or I use it for stew. We are almost done. Almost all the way down. Another 1.5 inches or so. Go. One completely skinned white-tailed deer. I'll spread out the hide so you can see it. Just gonna open it all the way up. And you could have this tanned. I actually have one that I tanned once. I thought it was a neat thing to have, and it came out really well. And I'll show you what it looks like. Here's the tail. And that's the hide. And this is the neck up here. And you can understand why people make like deer skin moccasins, because you just stick your hand in there and it's so warm. And that's it. So we got the whole hide off. There's our fully skinned deer, and now it looks like beef from the butcher. We all look the same underneath. All the white is fat. This is a lot of fat. We'll cut that off. That's what's used for suet in your bird feeders. All this white stuff here. It also, you can turn it into, you can melt it down, make lard. You can render it, which I also may do. And I'm going to show you there's 4 glands in a white-tailed deer that you want to be careful with. But this was clearly the first entrance right here, this hole. And I have not found that bullet. I don't know if it came out or not. The second one was put in through the bottom of the deer right here and exited at the top of the deer right here. So we'll have to see if we can find this initial bullet that he put in the deer's shoulder. He's a little far forward. He's in the shoulder bone. You really want to be right here, right at the crease where the shoulder connects to the body. Right here is a perfect shot. So he was about 2.5 inches too far forward, but he did catch the front of the lung, because when I gutted the deer out, you could see the lung was shredded, and that's what you want. You either want a heart shot or you want to puncture the lung, and the deer will die pretty quickly. Okay, I'm gonna start taking off some fat and then some meat, and we'll get it inside to process. So right here is a big clump of fat, and here it is on this side, and right here is a gland that you definitely want to get out. So what you do is you just cut off this big chunk of fat here. I cut it most of the way off on this side. That's what it looks like, and that is right. So here's the hind quarter. There's the hind quarter, and this is that big chunk of fat, and you just want to cut that off, and it pretty much just separates on its own. Let me put this knife where it's not gonna stick me. You can see it. I can almost just pull it right off. It's right on the front side of that hind quarter. And that's where one of those glands is. The gland is right here. And you definitely don't want that in your meat. You just toss that away. I did cut off the meat that I'm going to use for bacon. And we're going to bring that inside. We're going to get it all cleaned up so it looks nice. Cut off the dark red blood stuff on it. And then we're going to get it soaking in brown sugar and some honey, I think. And then that'll go in the smoker to hang. We'll make bacon out of that. Meat comes right off the bottom of the rib cage right here. You can see the whole rib cage. So there's the rib cage of the deer. And right at the bottom of the rib cage, the bottom of the chest basically, there's this thin strip of meat here. I also take this meat, which is attached on the outside of the ribs, and that makes pretty good bacon too. And we're going to use both those sections. I'm going to pull this deer all the way up so the coyotes can't get it tonight. Tomorrow we'll take off both front shoulders, which will be for burger meat. We'll take off all the neck meat. We'll take the 2 back straps out, which are steaks. And then we'll cut all this hind quarter meat off, which we're going to use for roasts that we're going to smoke, and we're going to corn. And basically we're just going to strip every piece of good meat off this deer, including the meat in the ribs here. You can see it's just in between the bones, and that just goes in for burger. There's the inner loins. I just grind them up. I'm not a big fan of eating tenderloins, but any meat that's here, all this meat that's not part of the back strap, all the neck meat, all the front shoulder meat is going to go to burger. All the rib meat will go to burger. The hindquarters, there's 4 good roasts in there. Those will go to smoking and corning, and then the rest of the meat on the hindquarters will go to burger. And we'll make bacon venison cheddar burger, and we'll make sausage out of it. So we are day 2 here. We're going to take off the front shoulders first. What you want to do is just spread them with your hands first, and you'll see all the connective tissue in the middle. And then you just cut through that connective tissue. They almost pull right off, but you can't quite pull them all the way off, especially up in here. You gotta find the bone. shoulder bone, just like we have up in here in the meat. And you just want to cut around it and then continue that cut. There you go. You got a whole front quarter. Just lay that right there and get the other quarter off. We got both quarters. We'll bring those inside. We'll get all the good meat off of them. And then we'll come out and we'll get the back straps out and the neck meat out. Neck meat's all going to be burger. The back strap is really good steak. It's the best steak in the deer. And then we'll cut off whatever remaining pieces we can get off of it up in the rib cage, the neck, all for burger. And then we'll lower it down all the way and start working on the hindquarters up there. So we lowered the deer. Now we're going to cut the back straps out. What you do is you go right here at the seam. You can see it's the hindquarters is from here back. And what you want to do is just cut in right here at the hindquarters, right across, over the backbone, and then to the other side. And then you want to find the backbone and you want to go right down it. I mean scraping right along it, all the way down on both sides. Come on down, cat. You get this nice thin piece of fat in the middle. That's how you know when you're going down both sides pretty evenly. Okay, now the back strap is underneath this fat. Like I said before, this is all suet. Birds love this stuff. You can also render it for tallow. I think I'm gonna make some. Not for this one. I don't really have time. Because I'm gonna smoke some meat tomorrow, and I'm gonna make a corned venison. So I got other projects I got to take care of more than making lard. Basically, on a pig you'd call it lard. On a cow you'd call it tallow. I think they call it tallow for venison too. Lard's good. I mean, use it for cooking instead of butter. You can oil pans with it. It's full of fat and protein. It'll keep you alive. You can make pemmican with it, which is basically like a meat bar. Okay, we got enough of that fat off. I can get in here. Basically, you just want to cut down the back strap right along the backbone. It's like a big fish fillet almost. And there are ends to this back strap, and I just found the end here. I'm pulling the fat away right there. So that's your starting point. There you go. Like I said, it's like a big fish fillet on the back of the deer. And this is the best steak in the deer, I think. It's tender. It doesn't move a lot on the deer's back, so it doesn't get tough. It's kind of cat. It's melt in your mouth. Leave it. Melt in your mouth type of steak. Cut away some more fat. This fat's really cold. It comes off a lot easier. You can almost peel it right off when it's a little warmer out. But it's 35 degrees right now, so not much is peeling off real easy right now. It's supposed to be warmer than this, but the weather people wrong as usual. Oh, there we go. Get my finger right down there. So now we can peel it out. Some people just rip this out, but I tend to lose too much meat when I rip it out. So I like to slice as I apply pressure to it, downward pressure, and get as much of that backstrap as possible, because it really is probably the best meat. Not like cutting up deer in September in New Jersey. And this backstrap goes way down into the neck. There's a lot to it. Some people use it for steak, which I do mostly, and then sometimes people just make, it's a big loin basically, and they'll make a big roast out of it. That's the meat and fat around it, down into the neck. Cut it off right here because the end of it got destroyed when the deer got shot. But as you can see, it's one big piece of loin. Very good. You can see took it right off its back there. Goes right down into the shoulder and the neck. We're going to do the same thing on this side. There we go. So we got both back straps out, and you can see right out of the deer there. So we're gonna go cut them up for steaks, and then we'll come back out and get whatever burger meat's left on this neck and chest area, and then we'll start working on the hindquarters. So here's my setup. Got a cutting board, that's a sharpener, there's a couple knives. I usually do this on the dining room table, but I felt like watching TV while I was doing it, so that's the loins, or the back strap that I just took off. We're going to clean them up, and they're going to be beautiful steak when I'm done. That is a bucket full of burger, a bowl full of burger, and this is the scrap pile, all the bloody, nasty meat and the fat. You got to have a scrap bowl. But that's what we got so far: burger, scrap, and we're going to have some really nice steaks here in a few minutes. So we're going to take one of these loins, and we're going to get the fat off it. That's the first thing we do. This fat comes off fairly easy. You just kind of fillet it off. And you don't go deep at all. You want to just get layer fat as much as possible. And you'll have to make a couple of cuts to get it off. but it'll come off. Just get right underneath it. Long, sharp, pointy knife is good for this. And you just kind of fillet that layer off. As you can see, there's some really nice meat underneath. I use pretty sharp knives. You want them sharp so you can cut this stuff off, so you can cut the meat. And you're never going to get every little piece off, and that's okay. It'll cook down. You just don't want the thing covered in it. Because these thin pieces of fat is what can make the deer not taste good. Kind of chewy. The thick fat, which kind of crumbles in your hands, that is what you use for tallow or for lard, whatever you want to call it. And that stuff will melt down. And if you have a little bit of that in your burger, it's actually not bad at all, because it adds some nice fat to your burger. Venison is a very, very lean meat. So if you can put a little bit of that venison fat in there, that's good. You just got to make sure you don't get any of those glands. I showed you the first two glands in the front end. I'll show you the rear glands in the back end when we get that in here. Flip it over and there's more stuff to slice off on the bottom side. Just some of that thin connective tissue. I wouldn't even call it fat, it's more like connective tissue, and just some bloody connective tissue or meat. Like I said, you're not going to get it all off. And this right here, so right here you can see there's a seam. And that's actually not part of the back strap. We're going to peel that off right here. That's going to go to burger. Just how it is. It's got fat on it, but that's okay. Like I said, for burger, it gets ground up, and it helps the consistency. Okay, so we've got the loin here. Sometimes I'll cut it in half, and like I said, use it for like a loin roast. And other times I just slice it into steaks, and that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to slice it into steaks. Here we go. About 1 inch thick. And you get these beautiful little round steaks. Boy, are they good. Cook them up with some onion, some garlic. You can also bake them if you want. I like to put them on the Blackstone or in a fry pan. And they get really tiny at the end. That's the real melt in the mouth pieces. But look at that. Steak, just little round tasty steaks. I have here the back strap. It's all those nice steaks we just cut up, and we usually put them, I believe these are quart bags, and just right on them. Back strap, and a rough date 10/20/24. Usually put 6 per bag. I'll bring you over here. some vacuum sealer. You just slide it in here. Each vacuum sealer comes with its own instructions, but basically you're sliding it in. Just push the button that says vacuum and seal. And it'll suck all the air out of it. Keeps it airtight so that you don't have to worry about bacteria getting in. You don't have to worry about it freezer burning. And it puts a nice vacuum seal right here. If you want to be doubly sure that it's sealed, you can just put it back in there over the sealer, hit seal. It will vacuum again, but it's not going to do anything because it's already vacuumed the air out. And it puts another seal in it. Now it's double sealed. And then you put it in the freezer. And that's all there is to it. You want to have a meal, you pull one of these out, let it thaw out, throw some onions, some garlic, some peppers, whatever you want in there, and fry them up or bake them if you like, and you have dinner. So now I'm just going to take off whatever excess meat there is here on the ribs and on the neck. There's always little chunks of meat in here. It's not a lot, but every little piece adds to the amount of burger we can make and the amount of sausage we can make. This is all just going to get ground up, so it doesn't really matter how it comes off. Doesn't have to look pretty, just chunks. And we want to stay away from the bloody meat. Oh, I forgot we got the inner loins here. Some people like to eat them whole. I just use them for burger. Clean them up and just grind them in the burger. These are the inner loins. They're opposite the back strap, and they're much smaller. Okay, looks like we got what we're going to get off the chest. So let's come down here to the neck. There is quite a bit of meat on the neck usually, though I think some of this meat got destroyed with the shot. So I think we can clean that up there now that I got that other chunk of bloody meat off. Basically you can feel the neck bone underneath and you just cut around it as best you can. Like I said, we're just chunking it up because it's going to be ground, so it doesn't have to come off looking pretty. And once I get it off, I'll clean it up inside, get the nasty parts off, and you'll have all this nice beautiful red meat here. For grinding. See? It's all nicely marbled red meat. Be great for grinding for burger. Okay. So we're going to go take care of this grinding meat, and then we'll come back out and we're going to completely debone both these hindquarters. Take them right off the bone. We'll bring them in and we'll cut them up into all the different roasts, and there'll also be some burger in there. We'll come back out in a few minutes. So now we're going to take the hindquarters off. And the way you do that is first you start at the knee and you take what we affectionately call the football off. You just slice right down in, and then you come down along the bone, right along the bone, gives you your first big chunk and roast off the hind quarter. We'll clean that up. That'll be a nice round roast that we're going to hang and smoke tomorrow. Right behind the butt, you come down and you find the hip bone, and you just, I don't know if I can show you from this side, it's probably the best way. You find the hip bone and you come around it, come around the hip bone and right back down the spine. That loosens up this big chunk of meat. You continue this cut right around the bottom of the deer. To the bone. Back to the bone again. You slice down the bone. Now you're creating like a flap that you can get right around the bone to that slice you made. And you can slice right up the bone. Right up the bone. Creating this flap that you can eventually just flap right over to the other side once I get it cut complete. I'm going to cut across the back where we cut the back strap. And up this side of the upper bone. There we go. Piece is just going to come off. Eventually here we're going to end up cutting this tendon, which is going to make this leg collapse. Eventually you don't have any way around it. You try and stay below the tendon for now to get the piece of meat off. But eventually when you cut, gotta be careful not to drop it. It's a big chunk of meat. Probably weighs 10-15 pounds. There's a big roast in there too, once we clean that up. There's the other hind quarter. It's a lot of meat right there. Okay, that's it. All the meat's off that we're gonna get off. Yow, cold. Carcass I'll throw up in the woods and the coyotes will drag it off eventually and eat away. And that's it. One processed deer, skinned and all the meat's off. That's all there is to it. It's a little work, but it's better than paying somebody $100 to $120 per deer to do it. So, plus you get to cut the meat how you want. You get the cuts of meat you want. Roast, burger, stew, however you want to do it. Hamburger. Hey everybody, so this is going to be the last video having to do with the deer being butchered, skinned and butchered, and this is an entire deer processed. So here we have steaks. These are all the back strap, these 6 packages. There's 2 roasts in each one of these bags. 3 of them I'm going to smoke and 1 of them I'm going to corn, like a corned beef except a corned venison. Both these 2 bags are going to be bacon. They're in a brine, which is made out of brown sugar, and they're soaking and they're going to get smoked as well. And then here, all these packages up front are stew meat. These packages, that's 15 pounds of bacon cheddar burger. And then this is another 15 pounds of sausage. And yeah, so you got a little bit of everything here. And this is what it looks like when your deer is done being processed. That's one deer. And it's all going to go in the deer freezer. And hopefully we're going to shoot a couple more deer before the season's over. Get all the freezers filled right up. Have plenty of meat for the next year. Plus we have some pork and some chicken and a whole bunch of vegetables that were frozen. So we're going to be in good shape for the season. Plus, of course, I got a whole bunch of canned stuff. That's just a little bit of it. I got a whole bunch of canned stuff. So, but yeah, this is what it looks like once you've finished processing a deer. And all the different cuts and things that you can do with it. Vermont Homesteader.